Hey everyone, welcome to the Bold and Beautiful 24. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love bold and beautiful, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in.
The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip behind the hills of Los Angeles, casting a warm golden glow over the city, but inside the hearts of everyone tied to the complex, messy and passionate lives of their friends and family, things felt anything but peaceful. The quiet hum of concern had spread through nearly every circle. Whispers and worried glances passed between loved ones who could sense that something was shifting between Deacon Sharp and Taylor Hayes. Their names had been on everyone's lips lately. It wasn't just the kind of idle gossip that usually circulates around Los Angeles like a soft breeze. This was different. There was real concern, real confusion, and under it all a quiet, almost electric anticipation. No one quite knew how they got here, how these two souls, both scarred by life and circumstance, had managed to find themselves pulled toward something neither of them expected. Deacon, the reformed bad boy, the man with a history that was almost as long as the list of people who had doubted him. Taylor, the brilliant psychiatrist, the woman with the gentle heart but a past heavy with grief, loss and emotional storms. Their connection wasn't something anyone had planned for, least of all themselves, but it was there, simmering beneath the surface. In the heart of this tangled emotional web, whispers floated through the familiar halls of Forrester Creations. Ridge, Brooke, Steffi, and Hope had all been talking in their own corners of the world, some more worried than others, some simply curious. Brooke couldn't hide her skepticism. She had always seen Deacon as a threat, a man who brought trouble wherever he went, no matter how hard he tried to change. Hope, torn between love for her father and loyalty to her family, struggled to explain to anyone, including herself, why she didn't see Deacon the way everyone else did. She knew he had made terrible choices, but she also knew the man he was trying to be now. She believed in second chances, in redemption, and that was the quiet truth that often separated her from Brooke. Ridge, on the other hand, never trusted Deacon for a second. The thought of him even getting close to Taylor, the woman Ridge would always have complicated feelings for, felt like a slow burn in the back of his chest. Steffi, protective of her mother to the core, didn't want to see Taylor get hurt again. She'd been through too much. If Deacon even thought of playing with her heart, Steffi knew she wouldn't hesitate to go to war. Meanwhile, far away from the noise of family debates and quiet judgments, Deacon and Taylor found themselves in a world that felt much quieter than the rest of Los Angeles. It was one of those strange in-between moments where nothing dramatic was supposed to happen, yet everything did. Deacon had invited Taylor to Il Giardino, his pride, his restaurant, the place where he had built something real for himself for once in his life. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It was just coffee, or at least that's what they told themselves. But the truth was heavier than that. Taylor hadn't expected to feel at ease around him, but she did. Deacon had a way of disarming people. Not with charm in a manipulative way, but with an unexpected sincerity that slipped through the cracks of his rough edges. Taylor had spent years helping people rebuild their lives, but here she was, looking at a man who was quietly rebuilding his own right in front of her. As they sat across from each other in the dim light of the restaurant, the late afternoon warmth wrapping around them, Taylor let herself laugh. Not the polite kind she often gave when she wanted to make other people comfortable, but a real soft, almost shy laugh that came from somewhere she hadn't touched in a long time. Deacon noticed it immediately, storing that sound away in his memory like a rare treasure. He wasn't supposed to be falling for her. He wasn't even sure what this was. But her smile did something to him. It calmed him in a way he didn't know he needed. What neither of them realized at that moment was that outside, in the shadows near the back entrance, someone else was watching. Sheila Carter, the woman whose presence could turn any quiet moment into an explosion of chaos. She had been drifting around lately, feeling the world shifting without her at the center of it, and she hated that feeling. Deacon had once been hers, or at least she had convinced herself of that. She had built her fantasies around the idea that they were partners, two broken people who somehow made sense together in their own twisted way. Watching him with Taylor now felt like betrayal that cut deep. She knew it wasn't rational. She knew Deacon didn't owe her anything. But logic was never something Sheila lived by. Her world ran on emotion, dark, impulsive, uncontrollable emotion. And seeing his hand inch a little closer to Taylor's across the table made something tighten in her chest like a vice. Back inside, Deacon and Taylor were lost in quiet conversation. Their words weren't grand or poetic. They were simple, honest. They talked about the strange ways life had led them here. About how they were both tired of carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. Taylor admitted she was tired of always being the strong one. The one who healed others but rarely let anyone heal her. Deacon confessed how hard it was to constantly prove that he wasn't the man everyone remembered him to be. They weren't pretending. They weren't hiding. It was raw, messy, and real. As the sun dipped lower, Taylor looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't let herself see before. Someone who understood loneliness, someone who didn't expect perfection. Deacon in turn looked at her and saw someone who wasn't judging him, who wasn't waiting for him to screw up. For a brief second, the world outside of that restaurant didn't exist. No Rich. No Brooke. No Hope. No Steffi. Just two people who, against every possible odd, felt something they couldn't explain. It happened almost without thought. Deacon reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from Taylor's face. She didn't pull back. Her breath caught softly in her throat. He wasn't forcing it. It wasn't one of those impulsive moves that came from desire alone. It was slow, hesitant, like he was giving her every second to back away. But she didn't. Taylor leaned in, and in that fragile, quiet moment, their arms wrapped around each other in a soft, uncertain embrace. It wasn't a passionate, heated kiss. It wasn't a desperate clinging. It was something far more intimate, the kind of embrace that carried weight, history, and maybe even a hint of hope. Sheila saw everything. Every small, careful movement. Every inch between them disappearing. Her eyes narrowed, and her jaw clenched as a storm brewed inside her. Her mind raced with the familiar mix of betrayal and rage that always preceded her most dangerous actions. She had told herself she wasn't going to interfere anymore. That she was going to stay out of Deacon's life, but watching him hold Taylor was like ripping open an old wound. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. Sheila wasn't just jealous. She was terrified of losing whatever illusion of control she still had. She backed away into the shadows, her heart hammering in her chest. Her breathing grew uneven, shallow, and sharp. Memories flickered in her head. All the ways people had taken things from her before. All the ways she had been shut out of other people's happiness. She had always been on the outside looking in. But this time the person inside was Deacon. The one man who had once looked at her with something close to kindness. She had believed she mattered to him, that they shared something twisted but real. And now here he was, wrapped around Taylor like she was the one who had always belonged. As Sheila's mind spun, inside the restaurant, Deacon and Taylor slowly pulled apart. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. It wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind of silence that comes after something real happens. Deacon gave a soft, uncertain laugh, rubbing the back of his neck like a teenage boy who didn't quite know what to do with his hands. Taylor smiled, small and genuine, the kind of smile that hadn't been on her face in a long time. She wasn't sure what it meant. She wasn't sure where this was going. But for the first time in a long time she wasn't scared of it. Meanwhile outside, Sheila's mind was already moving toward something dangerous. Her jealousy, her fear, and her sense of betrayal were weaving together into the kind of storm she was known for unleashing. If there was one thing everyone in this town had learned, it was that when Sheila Carter felt cornered, she didn't retreat. She struck. And as the sun finally disappeared behind the horizon, casting the city into the soft shadows of evening, something dark settled in her eyes. Back at Forrester Creations, Ridge paced the office, Brooke sitting on the edge of the desk, watching him. She knew his restlessness had everything to do with Taylor. She didn't like Deacon being anywhere near Taylor either, but for Ridge this was personal. Taylor was more than just his ex-wife, more than just the mother of his children. She was a part of him. A chapter that had never fully closed, no matter how many times he tried to move on. When he learned about Taylor spending time with Deacon, something inside him flared up in a way he didn't want to admit. Jealousy, possessiveness, concern. It was all tangled together. Brooke, on the other hand, was trying to be rational. She had her own complicated history with Deacon. History she would never fully be able to forget. The idea of him getting close to Taylor didn't sit right with her either, not because she wanted him for herself, but because she didn't trust him. Not with anyone she cared about. At the same time, Steffi was sitting at home, the weight of everything pressing on her chest. She had spent her life watching her parents get pulled back together and torn apart again. She had watched her mother give so much of herself, always choosing love, even when it left her broken. And now Deacon, of all people, was standing at the center of it. She picked up her phone, debating calling her mother, demanding answers, demanding to know if this was serious. But something in her told her not to push. Taylor deserved happiness, but Steffi couldn't silence the part of her that didn't trust Deacon as far as she could throw him. Hope, on the other hand, sat quietly at home, caught between worlds. Deacon was her father. Taylor was someone she respected deeply. She didn't know what to think about them together, but she also didn't want to be one more person judging them. She had spent her life watching people judge her father. She wanted to believe he could have something real. Maybe Taylor could be good for him. Maybe for once something good could come from all this chaos. As the night settled in and Los Angeles came alive in its usual restless way, the people who loved Taylor and Deacon were all moving through their own versions of the same storm. Worry, judgment, confusion, hope. And out there, somewhere in the dark, Sheila Carter's shadow grew heavier, her presence wrapping itself around their fragile new connection like a storm waiting to break. She wasn't going to sit back and watch Deacon give his heart to someone else. She wasn't built that way. Deacon and Taylor had no idea what they had just set in motion. To them it had been a small, quiet embrace. A fragile moment of connection between two people who had spent too long building walls around themselves. But in this town, nothing stays quiet for long. Love doesn't blossom without someone trying to tear it apart. And with Sheila watching, her mind a storm of rage and obsession, this was just the beginning of something much, much bigger. In the hours that followed, that one moment, that one soft embrace, would ripple through everyone connected to them. It would make Rich question everything he thought he'd moved past. It would make Brooke dig deeper into her own distrust of Deacon. It would force Hope to stand in a place she hated most, the middle. It would make Steffi go into protection mode for her mother. And above all, it would light a dangerous spark inside Sheila Carter. The kind of spark that never ever ends well. What none of them could have guessed was how this single quiet night would become a turning point. Deacon and Taylor had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. And Sheila, somewhere in the darkness, was already whispering to herself, promising she wouldn't let Taylor take what she believed was hers. The evening air hung heavy with that familiar Los Angeles restlessness, the kind that seemed to carry a whisper of drama with it wherever it went. As the soft buzz of the city deepened into night, Deacon and Taylor lingered at Il Giardino longer than they meant to. Their embrace hadn't been a grand declaration of love. It wasn't the kind of thing that would make headlines. But to them it was something real. For Taylor, it had been a long time since anyone had held her with that kind of quiet sincerity. No expectations, no power plays, no ghosts of the past demanding to be acknowledged. For Deacon, it was a reminder that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't destined to always be the guy on the outside. But beyond the glass of that restaurant window, hidden beneath the shadows of the alley, Sheila Carter remained. Her eyes were locked on them like a predator watching prey. Her pulse was steady now, unervingly so. That was how it always started with Sheila. People feared her explosive outbursts, but those who truly knew her, or had survived her, understood that the real danger began in moments like this, when she was quiet, when she was calculating. Her jealousy had hardened into something colder, more dangerous. Deacon had once been a part of her world. He had been her anchor when the rest of the town wanted her locked away or dead. He had been the one who saw her when no one else did. And now, in the span of a few seconds, it felt like he was slipping away to Taylor Hayes of all people. Sheila's mind began its familiar spiral. She replayed every conversation she and Deacon had ever had. The promises. The moments of vulnerability. The nights she told herself he understood her like no one else did. And the longer she watched, the more her anger built, not in loud waves, but in quiet, corrosive whispers. It was the kind of rage that crept up your spine and settled deep in your bones. Inside, Deacon didn't sense the storm brewing outside those doors. He was caught in the quiet beauty of the moment. Taylor tilted her head, studying him. She had spent years listening to people, reading them, dissecting their defenses. Deacon wasn't hiding. Not tonight. "You've changed, Deacon," she said. "And people don't like change." especially when it doesn't fit the version of you they've decided to keep in their heads. Her words landed deep, and Deacon didn't even try to hide the flicker of emotion in his eyes. "You see that?" he asked quietly, almost as if he didn't believe anyone actually could. She nodded, smiling softly. "Yeah, I see it." Outside, Sheila clenched her jaw so tightly it ached. Hearing his laugh, seeing that look in his eyes, the same eyes that used to light up when she was near, felt like watching something she believed belonged to her being stolen. It didn't matter that Deacon had never promised her forever. It didn't matter that their relationship was built on dysfunction, desperation, and something that had always teetered between danger and desire. In her mind, Deacon was hers, and Taylor Hayes had just crossed a line. Sheila whispered under her breath, the words barely audible. "No, no, 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 you don't get to take him from me." Her hand brushed against the cold brick wall of the alley, her nails scraping as if the act could ground her, but it didn't. Instead, the whispers in her mind grew louder, echoing all the old betrayals she had endured over the years. The people who had smiled in her face and then destroyed her. The ones who had taken everything from her. Meanwhile, inside the warm glow of Il Giardino, Taylor was trying to make sense of her own emotions. She hadn't come here looking for romance. She had come here to clear her head, to talk, to maybe find some unexpected clarity. But what she found instead was connection. A quiet, strange connection with a man she never thought she'd see this way. And she couldn't deny it anymore. She liked him. Not the idea of fixing him. Not as a patient. As a man. As Deacon. Deacon leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. "You know what's crazy? For the first time in a long time, I'm not thinking about who's judging me. I'm not looking over my shoulder waiting for someone to remind me of everything I've screwed up. I'm just here. With you." Taylor's eyes softened. "That's because I'm not judging you, Deacon. I know what it's like to be misunderstood. To have people think they know who you are because of the past. But people can change. You have." And there it was, the kind of gentle truth that no one ever gave him. Not Hope. Not Brooke. Not Rich. Certainly not the rest of this town. Only Taylor had said it in that way, with that kind of quiet certainty. Sheila's breathing quickened, the rage clawing its way up her throat. Every gentle word Taylor said felt like a slap. Every soft smile Deacon gave in return felt like a betrayal carved into her skin. Her hand curled into a fist, her knuckles turning white. She wanted to storm in there, to tear that moment apart the way only she could. But Sheila was nothing if not patient when it suited her. And tonight, she decided she wasn't going to confront them like some scorned woman. No, she was going to make them regret ever crossing her. She slowly backed away from the alley, slipping into the darkness like a storm retreating into the distance. But anyone who knew her would have recognized that look in her eyes, the one that always came before something terrible. By the time Deacon walked Taylor out to her car, the night was still and warm. The streets around the restaurant were quiet, just the soft sound of distant traffic. Taylor hesitated before unlocking her car door. "I don't know what this is," she admitted. "But I'm glad it happened." Deacon nodded, his chest tightening at the honesty in her voice. "Me too." For a second they just stood there. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. Familiar. A soft breeze moved between them, carrying the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine from somewhere down the block. And then, almost instinctively, Taylor leaned in. Not for another embrace. Just to rest her forehead lightly against his for a moment. A small, quiet gesture that said more than either of them could with words. When she finally drove off, Deacon stood on the sidewalk for a long time, watching the red glow of her taillights disappear. For once, he wasn't worried about what people would say. He wasn't thinking about his past. He was just happy. A feeling he hadn't let himself lean into for a long time. But what Deacon didn't know, what Taylor couldn't have imagined, was that somewhere in the darkness, Sheila Carter was already unraveling. By the time she returned to her small, cluttered apartment, the calm she had forced on herself outside the restaurant was gone. She paced like a caged animal, muttering to herself, replaying that embrace again and again. In Sheila's world, rejection wasn't just painful. It was unforgivable. And when Sheila Carter decided someone had wronged her, she didn't just get mad. She got even. Back at Forrester Creations, news of Deacon and Taylor's closeness had already begun to leak in quiet whispers. Hope had seen something in her father's eyes earlier in the day, something she hadn't seen in years. A kind of softness. She suspected it was Taylor, but she didn't want to say anything until she was sure. Brooke, on the other hand, was already frowning over her wineglass at home, replaying her own history with Deacon in her mind, feeling an old familiar discomfort she couldn't quite name. Ridge was restless, brooding like only he could. And Steffi was furious. Not because she didn't want her mother to be happy, but because she didn't trust Deacon Sharp with something as fragile as her mother's heart. The quiet, fragile connection Deacon and Taylor shared that night would soon become anything but quiet. Between Ridge's jealousy, Brooke's suspicion, Hope's conflicted loyalty, Steffi's protectiveness, and Sheila's spiraling obsession, that single embrace had become a ticking time bomb. And somewhere deep down Deacon could already feel it, the familiar weight of the world closing in. But this time he wasn't ready to run from it. This time he had something to fight for. Or rather someone. Taylor Hayes. But in this town love has a way of coming with a price. And with Sheila Carter lurking in the shadows, the price was about to be higher than anyone could imagine. Sheila sat down in the dark, the glow of the streetlights bleeding faintly through the blinds. Her eyes burned with unshed tears and something darker. "If I can't have you, Taylor won't either," she whispered to the empty room. Her voice was soft, calm. And that was the scariest part of all. Because Sheila Carter wasn't the type to just sit back and watch love stories unfold. She was the one who rewrote them in blood and chaos. And so, as the night deepened, the stage was set. Taylor Hayes had unknowingly walked into the eye of a storm. Deacon Sharp had unknowingly placed a target on his back. And Sheila Carter, she had just made up her mind.